I think code is a tool just as much as Figma is a tool or AI is a tool to visualize something.
Every other hosting company has it figured out, and that they feel a little bit like they're kind of, wading through tough waters and trying to sort things out themselves. And so they're always looking at what someone else is doing.
Things can be improved, but what is the price of that improvement? Is it really changing things for the better, or is it just there to do something new that might be ultimately confusing?
It's much less about trying to innovate on the user interface and the patterns that people are familiar with and things like that, but giving people a feeling of safety, security, and understanding of what their expectations are going to be when they press a button or flip a toggle. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, a podcast about the role hosting plays in shaping the open web. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman. On the show, we go deeper than uptime and dashboards. We talk about hosting as infrastructure, about ownership, independence, and what it takes to build ethical, high-end WordPress hosting that actually serves creators, businesses, and the internet itself. Before we dive in, head to impressive.host. That's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and help shape future conversations. You'll also find links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. Today, I'm very happy to say that we have Sanja Grbic, Senior Product Designer at Automattic, and a friend here to join us today. We're going to be talking about AI and product design and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. But Sanja, before we dive in, why don't you tell us where you are, because you have such an awesome view, and give us a little bit about information about yourself.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm calling in from San Francisco, the Automattic's office here in the Mission. We have a fantastic view of the city and a just gorgeous weather. I'm Sanja. I've been a designer for over 10 years now. I worked on many different products at several companies. My background is in architecture and graphic design. That's how I started. So always kind of in the intersection of technology and art or like applied art design. I worked at agencies. I've done kind of like a freelance stint as well, and my own design studio in Belgrade, Serbia, where I'm from. For a few years, I worked with startups from all over the world. And then I moved into strictly product design. I worked at Blacklane, which is now acquired by Uber. I worked at Issue, which was a global, which is a product that was number one global PDF to magazine platform. And then for the last 5 years, I've been so lucky to be at Automattic. First of all, because of all of the wonderful people that we have in our company, including you, Jesse. We work together a lot and every time we work together, I am always super excited about what we're going to come up with, and for the past 5 years, I've been on the Jetpack design team. And Jetpack, we serve self-hosted customers on Jetpack and, within many different domains like security and growth, analytics. More than 80 features are available on Jetpack to our self-hosted customers, but also Jetpack is the underlying technology for all of these types of features on WordPress.com as well. I worked on WP Cloud with you, on many other products, actually, on some WooCommerce products. I have a very rich experience in like working on different just products of a different nature, but always serving millions of customers, which is super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's pretty remarkable about the work that you do is that you never seem to approach it from a perspective of um, scale. It's always about the user first and making sure that they have a great experience. And so every time I see you working on something, I feel like you're thinking about that individual user, that narrow focus, and what their experience is going to be. And so it doesn't matter so much if it's used by millions or if it's used by 10 people. It's always going to be that first user experience up front, which is
Mm.
great.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jesse.
And so you and I, we embarked. It's now been a little more than a month and a half since we finished our RSMs. People listening at home may not know this, but Matt instituted this idea of a radical speed month, and so everyone at Automattic who participated paired up with somebody, and then they built something radically fast, radically cool, radically user centric, and we got to choose basically whatever it is that we wanted to work on, and we spent that month shipping something. And so I think if I'm correct, you worked on two projects, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So the RSM was such a wonderful opportunity for everyone, and everyone I spoke with loved it. I feel like it kind of awakened us. We I think we're all using AI now a lot in our daily process. Also, thanks to um, how Automatic is actually enabling us to do that and encouraging us. You know, using AI and speeding up your work is one thing, but then having the opportunity to choose what you want to work on to channel that energy that you have when you're passionate about an idea without having to lose it on persuasion, on negotiation, on gathering a team, and then just going for it. That was fantastic. So I couldn't help but not do two projects and not just one because it was so much fun. And the
Right.
time allowed for it. So I worked on I built something called the design system tracker that helps um, the users in my mind. First of all, were the designers within our company. So myself and my fellow designers in our design organization, when we navigate using design system components. Working with design systems is always complicated everywhere. It's an evolving thing that connects and lives inside many different products if the company is big enough. So just I wanted to build something where everyone can go and find all of the information that they need in one place so that they can make a decision whether which component to use or whether a new component needs to be created or who to contact or where to find more information. That was the first project. I worked in a team of three with Andrew and Melody. And it was a really great collaboration. But that kind of finished within 3 weeks, like 2.5 weeks. And then for the second one, I paired with Philippe, and that was a fantastic demonstration of speed. Philippe and I have worked together on a team together for 5 years, and he is our design lead now. And we know each other very well, and we know each other's processes very well. So we were able to align super quickly on what it is that we want to build. And then within 6 days, we were able to come up with the idea, do the research, and build together a chat app that connects merchants with customers on the site. So it was an iOS app paired with a plugin. Um, and it was a great proof of concept that we're gonna uh, work further on to get it out for our customers.
That's really cool. And so, for this podcast, the people at home are people working in the hosting industry, agencies, and other people building websites. Let's double back real quick to the design systems project that you worked on. I think that's really interesting, especially for companies that are trying to work within an open source system that everyone has some. I think from the perspective of the people who are building within WordPress, they all have an understanding of how WordPress functions and what they expect in terms of design and all that stuff. But there's a lot for a hosting company to incorporate in terms of design. There's their panel UI. There's the way in which they build plugins specifically for WordPress. There's the
Hmm.
everything from emails to the front end marketing website and all that stuff. So I'm curious, what advice would you give to a hosting company who is building and launching WordPress hosting solutions? Around the idea of incorporating design systems. What could they expect to benefit from? What should they know?
Hmm. Well, regarding the WordPress design system, the open source design system that we're contributing to actively, um, it is it is an it's a complicated. The nature of it is that it serves complicated workflows. So in itself, it's a lot of work to make sure that every component that is published out there for everyone to use, it is very important to make sure that the accessibility is in place, that it's compatible for all the versions, that it's and that in terms of UX, it can serve many use cases, and that it can be flexible enough for everyone to use it. So the advice I would give to hosting companies is, if you're building an interface and you are able to use the open source system, um, definitely check it out first, see what's available, see what's and as of late, this the design system tracker is also publicly available. Um, so they can have a look at what's available. At the same time, either audit what they already have if they're redesigning, or have some sort of plan of what they need to build, and use as much of the simpler components as they can, like um, I don't know, I'm going to say like buttons and typography styles and things like that, like just like smaller items, and then carefully consider also the more complex components that might fit their use case. If it doesn't entirely fit their use case, or they have an idea for something that could work not just for them but for other people, to please, you know, share that in the repository, share thoughts, open issues, contribute to it, so that we can all have those conversations together and make the design system better for everyone.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've run into a lot when I talk to hosting companies is the idea that they don't necessarily know exactly where they want to put uh, interface elements that the user interacts with, both in the panel and in the WP admin. I talk to hosting companies a lot about this, and sometimes they say, they really want to. You see this big shift where they're like, "We're going to suck everything into our panel, and we're going to allow you to, obviously that's where you can do all of your hosting configurations, set up SFTP. You can create email. You can bolt on all
Hmm.
these features, incorporate things from their marketplace." And then it seems like they get feedback from their users and they're like, well, I like to do everything inside the WP admin. And so then you see this shift where they're just like, okay, well, like now let's put everything
Hmm.
into a plugin. And so then they build a must use plugin. And so then you're inside the WordPress WP admin. And now all this functionality from hosting exists there. And I think the thing that I keep going back to is that you're never going to make any single customer happy, or you're not going to make every customer happy with one
Yeah.
single solution. And so, what I think makes a lot of sense, and something that we incorporated into the way in which we, built products for Jetpack, is that this idea of being where the user is. instead of worrying
Mm-hmm.
about, trying to funnel them into a specific place. We kind of just make sure that they have a great experience wherever that is. And so that could be in the panel, it could be in WP admin, it could be in the app. And sometimes even like, and I've noticed this too, is that there's more and more functionality being brought into email as well, in the sense that, everything from two-factor logins to updating settings or configurations or confirming something. There's always seems to be like a little button inside your email that takes you off to something to confirm something, and it enables some
True.
level of functionality. And so I'm thinking like a design system like this would actually be helpful in forming familiar patterns for users, so that no matter where they are, if they're in the panel UI or the WP admin, it feels the same, it looks the same. They aren't getting confused about how to set something up. And I would imagine it probably reduces the product designer's workload in replicating it. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it requires more testing because you have to do it in a whole bunch of other places and things like that. But it feels like a design library or a systems library like that would be helpful in solving that problem for that user.
Uh-huh. So definitely for the users, it's way better because then m- in more cases than not, users know what to expect. If the patterns are familiar, they can get used to that, and they're you know becoming kind of a universal experience. So that's what's really great about it. In terms of spending less time on design, that is also true. Of course, sometimes I think that the existing design system is um, design systems evolve continuously, so you can never say that it's ready, and it never really fits entirely the use case that you're working on. So there's always some work happening there to make sure to use what's available, but also not also keep the experience at a high standard. Systems thinking is always helpful, especially within the WordPress ecosystem that can be very, very complex, and it's serving very complex workflows quite often. So relying on a system like that is makes the most sense for sure.
Yeah, very
Uh,
cool.
yeah.
So, the other thing I noticed too with hosting companies is that they are always looking at each other as a way to see
Hmm.
like what, and I think that's obviously good, right? Competition is good. It drives to, the diversity in hosting is something that's valuable because it makes sure that we're always providing a better, more unique WordPress experience by allowing certain companies to innovate over on top of others and things like that. But at the same time, I think from what I see anyways in talking
Hmm.
to hosting companies and executives at hosting companies, that they often feel like every other hosting company has it figured out, and that they feel a little bit like they're kind of wading through tough waters and trying to sort things out themselves, and so they're always looking at what someone else is doing. And I find it funny because Automattic is a company where we feel very confident in experimenting. We run a lot
Hmm.
of experiments, and so if somebody might stumble upon an experiment and think to themselves like, "Oh, they're making a big paradigm shift. They're changing something here. We need to get on board and do that kind of thing too." And then all of a sudden our experiment's gone because it didn't work, right? And then
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it leaves people guessing. So I'm curious, when you think about product design and you're thinking
Hmm.
about something where an ecosystem that lives across a large landscape like WordPress, there's the WP admin, which has been a staple for users for a long time, and I think it's been a pretty familiar ground for a long time. But when hosting companies are building these panel UIs and making decisions around the way in which you interact with their product, there's so many
Hmm.
pieces that are exactly the same no matter who you go to. So like I said before, like setting like credentials for FTP, or
Okay.
um
Yeah.
or like adding a domain to your site, or like launching a new WordPress website. Like these are all like the same types of interactions, but I'm curious, like how do you feel like a hosting company should be differentiating themselves on product design? Is it
Hmm.
is it that they should be really focused on being as innovative as possible? Is that where they differentiate themselves? Or is it safer and better for everybody to incorporate design patterns that the entire industry uses so that everybody feels a little bit more familiar? How do you balance that with a large ecosystem like this?
That's a really, really good question. My instinct tells me that I would go the conservative route here, and I would make sure that some basic patterns are in there and always the same. And when we talk about like um, the items of the design system, or I don't know what we call them these days, but you know, a toggle a toggle switch is a toggle switch, and it should work the same everywhere. And there are some variations, and you can try, a few different ones. And usually when someone tries to innovate there, sometimes it does not serve its purpose in terms of like, I'm not sure if this toggle is on or off. Have you ever had that
Yeah.
experience?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Right? Yeah. Isn't that funny to have that? That's the essence of that component, is to have you switch something on or off. And you should be aware of what your action, just provoked, right? And it needs to be obvious. You shouldn't have to think about it. So I think that's a really good example. It has to work in a proven way. And then whatever innovation is happening, I feel like the innovations should happen in terms of, new features, allowing people to use new technologies, solving problems for them uh, that they express that they have, that are not necessarily, just like anticipated or made up completely. I kind of like how on Jetpack we experimented with integrating AI features when it was just the beginning of this whole thing that became pretty big. Uh, we incorporated it into the WPM, into the editor, into Gutenberg in a way by using patterns that already exist, and people know how to use, but the tools were still there. We didn't have to, come up with new ways of of designing interfaces in order to be innovative.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think humans in general, we're very familiar with patterns, and we we kind of incorporate them into our mindset and knowing what and way in the way in which something's going to work. It's funny because when I was
Mm-hmm.
growing up, my grandmother had the light switch in her dining room for whatever reason was installed upside down. So every time
Yes.
you'd flip the switch, it would be the exact opposite of your expectation. But the thing about the light is that you would know exactly what happened in that exact moment,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
regardless of your expectations of,
Unless the power
uh
is out.
well, yeah, right. So then, of course, when something goes down, then everything goes out the window anyway. But I think it's interesting because what you talked about there is that it's much less about, and I'm going to kind of try to summarize like the way in which we
Uh-huh.
had this conversation. It's much less about trying to innovate on the user interface and the patterns that people are familiar with and things like that, but giving people a feeling of safety, security, and understanding of what their expectations are going to be when they press a button or flip a toggle or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
But that the innovation can come from a different place, a source of providing a better user experience, providing better technology, giving them advanced access to new things and different things. But the pattern libraries that allow the users to interact with those tools should be more familiar and more of a clear understanding of how things are going to work. Now, of course, if we incorporate some kind of new AI, like when responsive web design came out, right? Everybody had these
Mm-hmm.
strong opinions about the hamburger menu. Remember that? Like, I'm sure you
Oh
do, like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
right?
So many
Everyone felt like those three
theories.
lines don't mean anything to people. And but the
Yeah.
reality of the situation is that like, like the light switch, we didn't have, the original light switch was like a turn dial, right? It was like a on and off. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an up and a
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
And so
It was 0 to 1.
yeah, but there's really no like, there was no inherent brain pattern to say that up means on and down means off. Like that wasn't something that existed. So it was something that had to be ingrained. And so when you grow up with something and you've been pressing the same light switch or flipping the same light switch for as many years as we've been on this planet, you start to develop, an expectation of how that's going to work. And I think that's the way in which we can think about building these design systems for, tools that everybody has so much familiarity with. Like, I think it makes so much more sense for us to think about designing, WordPress interfaces or hosting interfaces in a way that it is familiar for everyone, no matter what hosting company they're with. But the way in which you differentiate yourself is in the partnerships that you create, the technology that you add on, the things that you bolt on. But I don't think that it makes any sense to like diverge from the pattern so much that you create an uncomfortable feeling when someone either arrives or leaves your hosting company. I think that would be to the detriment of the whole system. Anyways, that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm interpreting from this.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I
Like, I
totally
think it
agree.
feels like that's a
Yeah.
good sum up there.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely. And but also what you pointed out, which is actually very important. There is still room for innovation. You can do it,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't be just for the sake of changing things, right? It has to has
Right.
have a meaning. Maybe someone once said, "This light switch, it does not make sense for it to be. Why am I turning this when I can I don't know, whatever, But
Yeah.
uh, things can be improved, but what is the price of that improvement? Is it really changing things for the better, or is it just there to do something new that might be ultimately confusing for people who switch on their light every day, and if the light switch is different every time they walk into a room, that's not going to be a great experience.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting because, with WP Cloud, we're 100% API based. So when a new partner,
Mm-hmm.
a new hosting company, or a registrar comes on and starts using WP Cloud, they have a choice. They can incorporate it into their existing panel. But if they don't have one, they can build a new panel, which actually, with the use of AI, we've seen a couple hosting companies develop panels. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, we have a partner that's going to be going live in a few weeks, who had an existing panel, and then they were like, you know what, we're shifting everything to WP Cloud. This probably feels like the right time to recreate our entire panel from the ground up and introduce something new. And they were able to use AI and a couple developers and designers to create a
Mm-hmm.
whole new panel UI in just a matter of days, actually,
Wow.
which was
Mm-hmm.
remarkable. And then we also have partners like Panel Alpha and RT Camp that offer white label panels. And I think, a conversation that I typically have with a hosting company is around like, why would we want to use a white labeled panel? It's going to look the same for everybody and it's not going to differentiate us. And I'm like, well, number one, you have your brand at the top. Your brand will always be first, right? And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what people are going to become more familiar with. I think absolutely with white label panels and other software, when it's white labeled, you kind of get a sense. You can kind of feel like I'm in this technology that I've seen before, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
super familiar with it. But at the same time, I think there's a simple argument there, which is that people are familiar with the idea of software having similar looks and feels. Like, Samsung and Motorola and Google are not differentiating themselves on, they take Android and the user interface is still very similar. Now they might tweak the colors and the designs and
Exactly.
things like that. But for the most part, you still can bounce around between an Android phone pretty easily. And I think, in the hosting industry, cPanel and Plesk have been around for long enough that,
Yeah.
and these hosting panels have existed in a way that a lot of people have, yes, they've modified things. Yes, they've, slimmed things down, removed functionality, added functionality. But for the
Which is
most part,
completely justified. Yeah, yeah. And
right,
needed.
right. But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, cPanel was cPanel, and you would know if you were in cPanel or if you weren't. So I think it actually works really well for our partners to for WP Cloud in particular to be able to say that we feel very confident that that you're not going to be differentiating yourself on, a few pixels around an icon, or whether it's designed a certain way or this way or that way. It's more around the user experience, is more about the emotion that the customer is going to feel. Do they feel empowered? Do they
Absolutely.
feel like they're
Hmm.
getting the things done? And it's less about like the little intricacies of a design. So I think that actually lends to a better solution for hosting companies to focus on different areas that they can feel comfortable leveraging these design systems and patterns, but then they can focus on other things to help make their user experience better.
Absolutely. The system is the base that you can rely on at all times. And then you have, on top of that, you have the time to innovate where actually where it'll make the biggest impact. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Very cool. So that was your first RSM project, the design systems setup, and then you
Yes.
started working on a second one. I don't know if we have time to dive into it yet, but I'm curious, real quick before we have to break for this episode,
Hmm.
what 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 was your biggest learning from RSM in terms of being a product designer? Like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't been a developer in the past as well, right? Like you weren't writing code
No.
in the past. But now with the use of AI, like you're actually getting into a place where you're taking not just the work of your product design, but you're actually getting into the actual implementation of it as well, right?
Yes.
How,
Hmm.
you know, tell us a little bit about how that went, or what you learned, or how does that feel? Does it feel weird? Does it feel
It's
cool, empowering?
it's it feels cool and empowering. I mean, being a developer, I always, for my entire career, I work in technology, so I always had to understand, and and learn. Like I don't know, 100 years ago, I took courses in HTML and CSS, and then afterwards, when I build my site, I can figure out the basics. But my um, idea was never to be an engineer. I think code is a tool just as much as Figma is a tool or AI is a tool to visualize something, um, to represent whatever. My job is to take something and to make it better, and I have exact goals and, how it needs to be improved. And all of that is in my head. And now I'm using a tool to visualize that and communicate that and show how that's going to work. Whether I'm going to sketch it on a piece of paper and then hand it over to someone to do a detailed design and then, or a developer to code it, or whether I go through this entire process, my biggest contribution is in the thinking and the and
Right.
and the part of like changing something to a better state, to better serve the customer, to better serve the business, to optimize for whatever. Um, and then I feel like I would never, I wouldn't in the past, I wouldn't mind to have code in my toolbox, right? But it's just too much work to do everything. But now with AI, I have this incredibly powerful tool in my toolbox, and I can choose depending on the situation and the project. I can choose which tool I want to use. I might still just write a blog post and describe, how something can be better, or I can go through the entire process and even deliver that uh, to a certain extent. Like engineers have knowledge that I don't have, and some, of course, complex features um, are still not something that AI can entirely do well. So,
I think that's really interesting though, because, and I definitely want to press on that. I think we'll come back
mhm,
in the next episode and talk more about that. But I think
mhm,
it's really interesting the world we're living in right now, where you have been focusing your whole career on these ideas and trying to make the user experience better, and you're probably feeling a little limited by who you could pair up with, or who you could hand it to, or
mhm,
who you could
yeah,
ask to actually build the thing that's in your head. But now you
mhm.
actually, maybe you don't have to wait anymore. Maybe you can
That's
you
true.
know
If I
yeah.
want to choose, yeah, less friction, less negotiation, less, trying to convince, to figure. Sometimes it's super easy. Sometimes it's just not working, and it's good to know that I can push it a little further, and then,
Even if
see
it's
how
just a
it
prototype and you
goes.
just, you can show
Absolutely.
people how it actually really work in the real world. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And then
Well, we're gonna.
okay. Yeah. I was gonna say, like, in the next episode, I want to share a little bit more about my insights around how organizations might adapt with these new,
I love
because we
that.
will all have to work together a little differently from now on. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, great. Well, thank you, Sanja, for being here, and we'll be back with another episode soon.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.